This morning, I've been tasked to share with you some thoughts about the future of the TOS. And I think it's a primary concern, not only of our conference now, but our conference 2 conferences ago. The first one, also here in Wheaton. And as the Theosophical Order of Service is a worldwide movement, a movement that has been sparked by the founding of the elder brethren, the adepts of the Theosophical Society, which sprouted into various subsidiary avenues of work like the Theosophical Order of Service. Hence we have on our shoulders a very heavy burden, the burden of carrying out the mandate given by the great teachers of humanity. And that is not an easy task. And I'd like to explore with you the possibilities for the next century. More and more in the future, I believe, the work of the TS and the TOS will blend such that in many cases, in many areas, the work of both will be indistinguishable. The reason is very simple. The primary aim of both are towards transformation, individual transformation and social transformation. And in that area, there is, to my mind, no difference at all between the work of the TS and the TOS. There will, of course, still be certain things that would make them a bit different. For example, in the TS, we will continue to talk about rounds and races and chains, and the TOS will not be involved in those at all. On the other hand, TOS will talk about maybe microcredit or relief or financial scholarship purely for giving scholarship, and the TS as a theosophical movement will also not be involved in those things. But where those things, any of those things, would involve transformation, then the 2 areas of work, the TS and the TOS, would not be different at all. It's just that the work is being approached from 2 directions. The first direction is from the understanding of the whole picture about the universe, humanity, evolution. And the other comes from the need, the compassionate need to help people who are suffering. And so the greater the focus on transformation in the work of the TOS, the greater is the blending of both. Now, as we have mentioned in a previous talk, anything that will have impact on society must involve 2 things. The first one is a sound idea, and the second one is a demonstration of its applicability to human life and society. And hence, it's the same thing with theosophy. Theosophy, as an idea, must be demonstrated to be useful in human life and society before it will create an impact on society and the world. And this is where the TOS will play its most important role. Now, in thinking, planning, and working towards such an effect or impact on society and individuals, there are 2 questions that we must keep in mind. The first one is, what is the quality of such influence or effect on people? Is it transformative of human beings of society? We may be helping people become less hungry today, but tomorrow they may continue to be hungry, and there's no real enduring transformation in the individual. We are not putting down or playing down the need for alleviating hunger, but the kind of work, the kind of help that we would like to do in the Theosophical Order of Service and the Theosophical Society is something more than the physical alleviation of suffering. And hence, the question is, to what extent will our TOS work bring about genuine, deep transformation in the individual and in society. The second question is on the quantity or scale of such an influence. Is it reaching enough people to make a difference in the world? Is it an important question? If we're doing personal charity, philanthropy, then maybe it's not an important question. We do it because we are in a situation where we can help, and we do so. But as a theosophical movement, then it becomes a relevant question, because the Mahatmas did not set up the Theosophical Society for small pockets of people in the world, but rather for the world in general. So let's touch a bit first on the quality of the influence or the impact. Suppose we're giving scholarship. Now, we can give scholarship simply by giving money and letting them go through school and finish school, and that's it. And they'll say thank you to us. And thousands of entities around the world are doing that. The ones who are providing the scholarship may never even get to meet any of the scholars benefited. On the other hand, it can be a guided scholarship, a scholarship in which the more important part is the development of the young, of the student, of the children, character building, building up of the entire integrated personality. This, I believe, is far more important than the academic benefits of a scholarship. And hence, in theosophical scholarships, I believe, the approach should always be one of deep and, if possible, profound interaction between the TOS or the TS and the students, wherein which the students get to learn something more than just mathematics or English. Rather, they learn more about how to live the right life or a good life. Then, if you ever go into school education, it must not just be a school for the purpose of producing graduates who will earn sufficient income after they have finished, but rather it should be a school for life. I believe that a theosophical school must be a school for life. Or if we're going into microcredit, meaning lending people in order to make them become economically self-sufficient, it should not merely be an economic program, but rather a microcredit program wherein which the entire family view, members of the family, are influenced to live a different kind of life. In the Philippines, we were involved in microcredit for many, many years, involving hundreds of people in about 5 communities. And after many years of doing it, many of them become not well off, but economically they became stable. But we realized that just helping them economically is not the answer to their problems, because we have observed families who, after they have earned enough income, develop new vices because they have more money to spend. And so we realized that providing money is not the root solution. It must involve a change in the individuals. I've known of couples who, when they were relatively poor, were happily together. But after, in one case, a husband who was very industrious, very resourceful, became quite successful in his career, in his work, in his income. Then that's when the problem started. And eventually the two of them had to part, because the husband began to have extracurricular activities and other things that broke up the family. They even had to sell a piece of land which they saved for many, many years. So the deeper facet of any kind of intervention, I think, is what we would like to be able to achieve in whatever TOS project we do. Now, in doing that, we probably have to think about clear criteria as to the theosophical dimension in service work. I'm just giving here some examples, and we can brainstorm on them. For example, any service work that will promote human solidarity or universal brotherhood, I believe would have theosophical content. Anything that promotes character building, ethical living, I believe would have theosophical dimensions. Anything that promotes human rights and dignity, promotes wholesome way of living and spirituality, promotes compassion, I believe would have such theosophical dimension. In almost anything that we do in order to help people, even if purely physical or economic, we can introduce such dimensions such that it becomes a theosophical service. How about the scale of the impact? Now, the TOS has made great strides in its international networking and has expanded its work in many places. Now, should we enlarge further? I believe that we should, and the reasons are as follows. Today, most charities focus on specific physical or material or economic needs, or even things like psychological needs, for example, like helping battered women. But there's also a need to promote transformative philanthropy, that is, something geared towards the transformation of people and society. And many charities are not prepared for this. The TOS is in a unique position to promote this kind of philanthropy due to its root philosophy. And the TS was established to promote global transformation and not just small-scale changes. So that is our mandate, and that's the reason why we have to consider the scale of what we do. It is not about being megalomaniac, being ambitious, but simply because it's a duty. I take it more as a duty. In the next 100 years, can we look into what are possible for the TOS? Let's look at scale. Now, I had a few exchanges with Diana about how much are we doing right now in the TOS throughout the world. And we estimated what is our budget in the Philippines, the budget in the TOS U.S.A, the budget in India, and so on. And we came up with something like maybe about $200,000 or $300,000 US dollars. So maybe 400,000 might be a safe estimate, but if not, double it further to 800,000. But that's about it. That's what we are doing in the TOS if we combine all our efforts around the world. And these are primarily raised among TS members or local donors. What seems untapped in our TOS work is external donors. There are many funders in the world today who are looking for worthwhile projects. These are foundations, NGOs, funds, corporations, country aid programs like U.S.A, KOICA, this Korean Overseas International Cooperation Agency. Japan also has that, Netherlands has that, UK has that, and then also individuals and family foundations. They tend to support medium-term organizations that have demonstrated credibility, and they don't help in small scale. They tend to help in a rather large scale. I'll just give some examples of our own encounters with these. For example, when Golden Link was putting up a new wing of the building, we happened to be dealing with an apparel company in Europe, in France. And when this was mentioned, this company said, oh, we can help you in that one. And he said, just send over a proposal. So we sent a proposal about the whole wing of the building. I think it's 3 or 4 stories high. They funded it entirely without questions asked. And what we did afterwards was just make a report. And it was something which was quite easily done, and to them, they were looking for such projects. Then, in the Philippines, there are many French NGOs. NGOs are non-government organizations that are meant to do help to societies. And several of them have already approached Golden Link because they heard Golden Link from other NGOs. And then what they are looking for, because there are many people that are in need in the Philippines, and yet they don't want just to go to any of those groups. They want reliable partners that will have sustainability, professionalism, an organized system of administering projects. And hence, as of now, we are dealing with 2 such NGOs, which are branches of French NGOs in France, and they have these branches in the Philippines. Let me just share with you the experience of peace organization in the southern part of the Philippines. It's called, it started as a very small effort wanting to bring about peace in Mindanao. Mindanao is the southernmost part of the Philippines, where in which there had been problems between the Muslims and the Christians and the Lumans. This has been going on for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 generations already. And the founder of this, a young man, was very good in making proposals. This is his forte. And what he does is just think of a project for a particular group or community, wrap it up into a project proposal, look for those who are interested in peace education and peace projects, and submit to several. And he has been very successful in this because he's been able to match the need of a community and what donors are looking for. He was able to match them, and this small effort has now grown into 5 or 6 NGOs or foundations, including 2 institutes, polytechnic institutes, serving the poor people in Mindanao. And this is just within, I don't know, 5 or 10 years' time. And so the ability to be able to identify and match, I think, is something which we should also try to learn in order to widen our base of funding in TOS. I sit in a board of a Philippine Foundation for the Disabled. It's a branch, or it's a chapter of a worldwide organization based in UK. And I've learned a lot from my association with this NGO, with this foundation. After the first year, actually, of being with them as a board member, they asked me to be president of this Philippine operation, but I declined because of my theosophical commitments. But I'm still sitting in the board. What they have is that they have an international operation based in UK, and they're working in 53 countries with 250 centers and more than 1,000 projects all over the world. And they have been able to sustain this for years and years and years. It was founded in 1948, so it's more than 60 years now. And not only were they able to sustain this large operation, but it has been growing. So what they do is that they have a group that's doing all this matching between large corporations' interest in funding, and then matching the need of local communities, countries, and so on. And they develop the project proposal, and every year, as of I think 2012, the budget is something like 240 million. That's for 1 year alone for the disabled, in addition to local funds that they are able to raise. In other words, here was the capability of continually being able to first match donors and recipients, and second, to be able to prove their reliability and competence in carrying out what they propose to do. Now, let's look at some potentials by looking at what are existing, what we can see around among existing foundations or philanthropies. So I've mentioned here that in our TOS, we're doing a lot already. We are founded in 1908, and we are already 105 years old. Our budget worldwide is 400 to 800,000. Now, while I was doing some research on this, I, at random, looked for a foundation in the Philippines, which publishes its financial statements in the internet, and this is one of them. It's a relatively, not a large-scale, shelter for the homeless or abandoned children, and it's now 34 years old. And this organization in one of the smaller cities in the Philippines has a budget of $1,593,000. And I was surprised that such a small operation can generate such a big amount of funds. And then I went again through the internet and found some of these things. For example, ASPCR, American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, now 147 years old, has an annual budget of $145 million. Then let's go down. Many of these are Christian organizations and foundations, and they do specialized work, and some of them are general. They do general philanthropic work. Here is another one. Here are other charities that have annual budgets of this range, and I put here the number of years that they have been in existence. Many of them are for children. Now, I'd like to just call your attention to Shriners Hospitals. This is a Masonic charity. This was founded in 1920, so it's now about 93 years. It has an annual budget of $570 million. It is just treating a very specialized type of patients, burned and crippled children. That's all. They're not interested in adults, they're not interested in other forms of disabilities, but just burned and crippled children. And yet, they have, there is a tremendous interest in what they do, such that in 2006, just on endowments, they have $10.2 billion. It dropped down drastically because of the financial crisis. But just imagine $10.2 billion in voluntary endowments from private individuals who believe in their work. At just 40% per year, that's already $400 million budget a year, aside from annual donations to them. The possibilities are quite staggering. Here are some of the largest. And you'll notice that many of them are religious ones. Catholic Relief Services, Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, and Lutheran. And look at the annual budget of the Lutheran services in America alone, not the world, but in America, $18 billion every year. What they do about it or where they get the money, I don't know. I have no idea at all. But it opens up what groups can do when there is something worthwhile, something worthy, and then there is an organized effort to do so. So I thought I'd like to share with you some pivotal decisions if we'd like to explore enlarging the scale of our TOS work. 5 facets. One is that it seems important that we focus on a few major directions rather than scatter ourselves very thinly on many, many things. The second is the need to synergize. The third is to professionalize. The fourth is to make it a public movement. And the fifth, and very important, is to be able to sustain. In focusing, we become expert in a field. If it's disability, then an organization becomes an expert in a field, whether it's medically, physically, in terms of equipment and other things, or education. Then they tend to become, they know what they do more than other people. And if we focus, we become more effective and have more impact on that particular work that we set out to do. And then we tend to draw committed regular donors who are particularly interested in that area of work, and they are willing to do long-term usually if that's their interest. Here are some examples of very focused work, and yet it had grown so large. Grameen Bank is, I think, well known to all of us because the bank, as well as its founder, Muhammad Yunus, received the Nobel Prize for Peace for their work in microcredit system. And they just really started on microcredit, helping poor, especially women in Bangladesh. And if I remember right, they have branched out to so many things. They are running, I think, one of the biggest mobile telephone company in Bangladesh, again for helping poor farmers. Then Shriners, Hospital for Crippled Children and Burn Children. Then the LaSalle Brothers, which I mentioned the other day, which set out to educate the poor but now includes the elite, and they have a string of schools all over the world that educate 900,000, almost 1 million children. Then Leonard Cheshire Disability for the Disabled. They just focus on an area, but they grew so large. Synergize. We increase our expertise because there are many things which, for example, one person don't know or can't do, but which another person does. And then by synergizing, what is not possible before would now be possible. And we also are able to do more than if we do it singly, so that 1 + 1 is not equal to 2, but rather it produces a new dimension that makes it more than just 1 + 1. And we are able to sustain anything better when there is synergy. Then professionalization. Now this is a tricky facet because some of us in the Theosophical Society being used to voluntarism find that this is somewhat difficult to entertain, especially when the scale is small. But when it becomes a larger operation, this becomes necessary. I mean, for example, many of our sections, whether it's TSA or in the Philippines, cannot run on pure voluntarism. We need to have accountants, we need to have people who will do regular things. And so full-time staff who are adequately trained would become necessary. Then it increases also effectiveness in delivery of service and relationship with donors when there is stability, there is expertise, and there is specialization. Then making it into a public movement. Oftentimes we tend to look in terms of the group of theosophists doing charity work among ourselves. But I think we should look at philanthropic work not as simply theosophical, but it can involve anybody else. To involve the general public in advocacy, including the government. I'll just give an example. Yesterday, Renee mentioned about the essay contest. This was a national contest in which we involved various other institutions, government entities. That's why it became quite well known. We involved the Department of Education. We involved the government's, what do they call it? Information agency or something, public information agency. And then we involved the United Nations Development Program. And together, the essay contest was launched. It was, I think the title of the essay contest was, What I Can Do for Peace. And it was addressed to young people of a certain age. And so many essays were submitted from all over the Philippines. Then, by involving the public, then we also widened the base of financial support from outside of the TOS or the Theosophical Society. Now, sustaining. In sustaining it, we have to set annual, medium-term, and long-term goals, then have a system wherein which we can have performance indices, and then create an internal structure that will ensure sustenance and growth of work. I'm just putting this in a general way, but these are so essential so that something doesn't die after 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. Now, as I have done so in the previous talk, I just would like to take as an example of what can be done with this view in mind, and I'll speak about something I'm quite familiar with, and that is the establishment of Theosophical School. So if you focus, for example, on this particular direction, and it's a very difficult task, I think all of us know, then I'm imagining, suppose one of the other sections, I don't know, whatever country would like to do so, like our neighbor is Indonesia. Suppose Indonesia is interested in having such a school. What can be done together as a TOS in order to make it easier for them to do so? We have to synergize, then professionalize, make it into public movement, and then sustain. We can, for example, pilot 1 or 2 schools for the next 5 years. I mentioned here Wheaton because I've heard about talks here of the interest of having a school here in the United States. And I mentioned just this morning that one of the difficult things to put up in a school is, first you must have the land, and the second you must have buildings. The others would be people and the methodology or the curriculum. But physically, materially, the harder part would be the land and buildings. And it's something that you have here. You have so much available here in Wheaton. And as an example, if there are, suppose, 3 or 4 theosophists who are really interested in this, they can actually start and run a school on their own and rent from Wheaton, from the headquarters. Not even run by Wheaton, but run by them, with the understanding that it will be a theosophical school. And if that works, then it can go on and on without adding any kind of responsibility burden upon Wheaton itself. It can, of course, be done by the TS itself or the TOS, but that's an option. Those are options that are available. Suppose it is in Asia. It can be floated around during conventions, and the reason why I mentioned Asia is because if it's another country which may need some kind of support, it may be helpful for it to be near a place where there are already existing schools who will help them. So for example, if it's in Asia, where would the curriculum come from? It doesn't have to be invented from scratch. It can, because there are existing curricula already in India, in the Philippines, and even in Australia. Australia, I believe, or New Zealand had a theosophical school for many, many years until it closed, I think, in the 1950s. Australia, I believe, also had schools, but which closed eventually. So these countries have had experiences in running theosophical schools. Then funding, it must primarily be local and must not be over-dependent on international, because that's quite dangerous. Because if one day the international supporters or donors are unable to support for one reason or another, then it will collapse. So the strength of the funding must still come from the local area where the school is established. Then management is local, but with international helpers. The management of the school, the people. Here it refers to the people. This one refers to the system. How do you run a school? There are established ways of running a school, different from running a corporation or a business. And then a faculty, it can be local or visiting faculty. Now these are some of the more difficult things in putting up a school, and many of the knowledge on these are already available. It just needs somebody who will be able to decide, all right, we'll put up a school, and then let's go. It is something very doable. I just thought of sharing with you what are the numbers involved in setting up a school. I'm thinking of Asia, not here in the United States. and that the figures involved are not really that impossible to attain. For example, if you have 1 hectare of land, that would be more than sufficient for a school, even up to college level, and it will cost from something like $100,000 to $300,000 US dollars. The building for a classroom may cost about $100,000. Then furnitures and other things would probably be just $10,000. So to start a school would need, depending on the land, $210,000 or to $410,000. Then if it is expanded, let's say to 15 rooms, then it means additional $300,000. So you're talking about something like $700,000 for an entire school for maybe, I don't know, 10 years or so. Then these are the investments, and this would be the year-to-year cost or overhead, like staff and overhead. And it will cost something like $22,000 a year in Asia, and add $15,000 a year for each year when higher grade levels are added. So you don't have to be overwhelmed by the numbers. It's just that it is something doable. It is not something so difficult or staggering to achieve. Now, that was a school. Are there other directions, at least 3 directions, which we can identify, or in which we can focus on and synergize on? There are many things which we can think about, like, for example, world peace, things that would promote human solidarity or universal brotherhood, personal transformation, environment or ecology, education, health, poverty eradication, and other things. In other words, what would we consider as something closest to our theosophical heart, closest to what we deem as theosophically important? And then can we focus on a few and do it on a relatively larger scale? In order to do this, I think it's important that when we go into rather larger scale, we need to develop a kind of international standard for making project proposals. This is a skill in itself. I just realized it when I found that there are many consultants who specialize on nothing except on making proposals. And the fact that they are doing it will increase the chance of success than if we do it ourselves. Then the quality of providing services, compliance with donor conditions, and then project management and monitoring, and financial management and monitoring. When these are weak, then one may get a grant for one time, 1 year or 2 years, but it will not be repeated because the credibility is not there. And therefore, when there is no such standard, it may be risky to start. I'll move on to the next. Well, in all of these things, there will be a learning curve. It will take us several years to really be able to do well in these areas. There's a second one. There's a need for a team to evaluate projects and prepare grant applications who are familiar with format, documentation, deadlines, and how to follow up. And be able to assess the worthwhileness of a project. I'm just thinking out loud, brainstorming, on the brainstorming process. For example, if there's such a team who know about this, how to approach donor grantors, and then who are familiar with the projects of TOS all over the world, there's a need to assess which one is really worthwhile. Taking into consideration the need for the project, long-term goals, potential impact in society, and so on. And then assess the preparedness of the people behind the project. A project may be excellent, and yet the people may not be ready to really implement it and sustain it in the long run. And this is not something quite easy for many of us who are doing work on a voluntary basis. It is for this reason that somehow it must be at least partially professionalized. There should be a long-term commitment on any such projects if it's going to be funded from outside of the TOS. And there should be individual and organizational competency. Preferably, projects should be visited by the group who's trying to think of a proposal to tap outside donors to be able to fund it. Now, these things may look staggering, intimidating, but I'm reminded that if in 1948 a British pilot was able to start a small service effort for the disabled, and which by persistence has become one of the biggest philanthropic organizations for the disabled today in the world, if he could do that. If an obscure priest in France was able to start a small school for the poor, and which has grown to become one of the biggest private educational networks in the world today, teaching 900,000 students, why can't the TOS be able to do the same thing? If the TOS, having the right seeds of service work rooted in the ageless wisdom, can prepare itself in order to render such kinds of services to those who are in need, then I believe that we'd be able to do the things that other people have been able to do. It is difficult, but when the seed is right, when the idea is right, then I'd say we must fear no failure. We may stumble and fall and have temporary setbacks and defeat 100 times, 1,000 times. But if it's something truly worthwhile, then it will eventually work. We may not be able to see it in our lifetime, what we are talking about here. 100 years from now, maybe Joe Guller would be able to see it, but most of us would not. But it's something which, if we have the commitment and the persistence, it will come about. And that, I think, should be and will be the future of the TOS a century from now. Good morning to all of you.